Welcome, everyone, to the Sports Illustrated Media Podcast. I am your host, Jimmy Traina. Thank you for listening. Great show this week. We've got two guests. Rich Eisen from the NFL Network and Peacock kicks it off, followed by Chief Media Critic for Rolling Stone, Alan Sepinwall, who just put together a big top 100 sitcoms of all time list. So we get into that with Alan, and then Rich, we talk about the NFL draft and Kenny Mayne leaving ESPN in the glory days of SportsCenter and those anchors in that time period a while ago when Rich was there, and how much it meant to sports fans. So check those out. Upcoming in 1 second, right after I tell you that if you missed last week's show, it was a good one with Ryan Russillo from The Ringer and Brian Baumgartner from The Office. If you missed it, check it out. Subscribe to the SI Media Podcast, and if you can rate and review, that helps too. All right, here we go. This week's show with Rich Eisen and Alan Sepinwall. All right, joining me now. Always like to have him on the show. It's been way too long, by the way. From the NFL Network, Rich Eisen. Rich, how are you?
How are you, Jimmy? It's been too long. I think it was in person the last time we did it.
Was it? Okay. That's always...
Before the season.
You know, I remember the last time you were on, you dropped a good nugget because you had seen Curb before it came on in early 2020, and you sort of tipped us off there'd be something with the MAGA hat, which ended up being that first episode, which was so memorable.
Yes. I can't wait for the next season. I'm totally in the dark about it right now, other than the fact that they're shooting the final week right now. They're shooting their final week of shooting right now.
I know that Jeff Garland told Kyle Brandt on his pod that there'll only be one episode devoted sort of to COVID in the next season. So,
okay.
Which is fine. I have no issue with that.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned Rich, of course, hosts the Rich Eisen Show every day, 12 to 3 Eastern on Peacock, and he has a relatively new podcast called Just Getting Started. So we have a lot to discuss. Let's get into what's easily the most important topic that everyone needs to get into. Bennifer, your thoughts?
I mean, if you had told me at the top of the week, Jimmy, that we'd be talking about Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez getting back together and Tim Tebow reuniting with Urban Meyer, I would have thought, I'll be honest, I would have thought the Bennifer would be more of a stretch, but you can't keep lovebirds away from each other, I guess.
I like how you answered my question. Seriously, I appreciate that.
Oh, of course. Anything you send me my way, I'm willing to try and put my exit velocity on, you know?
I will say this. I didn't quite get there, thanks to my black heart, but I almost felt bad for A-Rod a teeny tiny bit this morning when I saw sounds like he's also not going to get his Timberwolves ownership. Sounds like there's issues with that. So.
Oh, is that right? I did not know that.
Yeah, that seems
What's going on?
I don't know. Something about, I just saw a bunch of tweets that said there's some issues there.
With him or with the bid itself?
The bid and closing the deal.
Oh, my.
So that's a hell of a rough week there.
Well, you know what? I got to be honest with you, Jimmy. I thought there might be trouble in A-Rod, J-Lo, River City when they came on Sunday Night Baseball and presented him with a birthday cake that looked straight from Shawmut's and with just the words "Happy Birthday," not even personalized to Alex. And I'm still wondering again if there might be an issue even within the booth or the broadcast itself, because you know, Jimmy, for all the time that you've been around TV people and media people, that anytime there's free food, somebody's going to dig into it. And the cake wasn't even touched. Right. I mean, like Santiago's clothes in his closet, you know, they were not touched. And normally we in the media will pull a code red on anything free food. Nobody touched A-Rod's birthday cake. So I think there's a lot of issues we're underlying on this front, you know?
Yeah, maybe not someone people wanted to celebrate with for some reason. I don't know. But, you know, and then there is a great angle here, though, all kidding aside, for people like us who are in the content business, where, you know, Ben Affleck's this diehard Red Sox fan, that it does make the story a little bit, brings it into our world a little bit.
Well, I guess this is then 2003, right? A major comeback on a Yankee that nobody saw coming. Yeah. That maybe we'll be talking about for years to come. That's maybe what it is, Jimmy. You know. All
right. Well, now everyone will tune out because they heard us break down Bennifer. That's what the people wanted. But
this is called content, as you point out. So,
what ran through your head yesterday when you saw that Kenny Mayne was leaving ESPN.
Oh my gosh. I thought what an incredible run for Kenny. I mean, he was one of the ESPN2 anchors that were already there, and, established as Bristol broadcasters when I arrived there in 1996. And Kenny and Stewart started together along with Susie Kolber, was part of that whole group of on-air personalities at ESPN. And the fact that Kenny is now leaving in 2021, I mean, what an incredible run for him. And to go from ESPN2 to Keith Olbermann's chair, and obviously, his Sunday morning pieces and all of his SportsCenter staying power, it truly is an amazing, remarkable run for Kenny.
It's always the way I always think of it is that you and Dan Patrick sort of set the sort of model for you can have life after ESPN. I think you guys were the first two to do it. I don't know the order, you and Dan, but do people who leave ESPN ever go to you for advice on how to sort of navigate the post ESPN career?
Not really. That's never really happened. I would also proffer to say, Craig Kilborn showed that there was life after Bristol, and in certain endeavors that nobody's really ever successfully mounted. I know he kind of left his situation following David Letterman unfinished or by himself, or I'm still wondering how that all went down. And at some point, I guess we'll find that out if he wants to tell the story or not. But Craig had a remarkable career after he left ESPN, and Keith also left. Both of them left when I was relatively new to ESPN. I mean, Kilborn, I remember he and I did one SportsCenter together in '96, just after I arrived there. And he asked me, called all young ones Spark, Sparky. Hey, do you want to Spark? Do you want to go and grab some dinner? And I thought, absolutely, I'll grab dinner with Craig Kilborn. This is awesome. And he took me through the drive-through of the Kenny Rogers Roll and Roaster in Southington, Connecticut, which is right next door to Bristol. And I remember him telling me as we went through the drive-through, Jimmy, that he was thinking of leaving ESPN. And again, I had just arrived there and I'm thinking, what the hell is he talking about?
Right.
And he described to me the opportunity that he had, and it was the Daily Show. And as we're going through the road, do you think I should do it, Spark? And I'm, I don't know, I guess so. So he left just as I got there. And then Keith left about a year or so after that. But nobody's really ever come to me for advice of any sort like that. And if they did, I would tell them, what I believed in myself and in my opportunity was whatever I could make of it. And that's obviously what a lot of folks would absolutely be able to pull off. And Kenny, I'm sure, is one of them. Yeah. Because on top of it all, though, I will fully and readily say this, that the platform that ESPN provides is still second to none. I mean, I don't believe I've ever been on a TV show in 100 million households since I left ESPN. And their platform and also echo chamber of what is said on the platform is truly a model that everybody else, I think, is trying to replicate, whether it's Fox Sports, FS1, or even what I'm doing every day, and trying to replicate it as the echo chamber being my social media feeds and my YouTube page. But so that's interesting. My answer to that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, in this day and age where everything's black and white, there's a lot of gray here, because I feel like what you said, there's still so much power in ESPN, but there's never been a better time to leave because of so many opportunities that are out there now because of the streaming world, podcasts. Everyone sort of, not everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people going out on their own and their own brand and all that stuff. So it's the best of both worlds, I think, right now, if you want to be at ESPN or if you want to do your own thing. Where when you left, I think it was more of like, you're leaving ESPN. That's,
My favorite story of that, Jimmy, was Jimmy Kimmel having me on to promote NFL Network and telling me I'd be back on ESPN within 6 months, which was a funny line at the time. But I'm walking off the set saying, shit, is he really is he right? Is that possible? And it was fraught with a lot starting NFL Network, only on in DirecTV and small other cable households. We were barely on 12 million homes. And my wife was out. She was out here, moved back east briefly. We got married. I thought I would stay at ESPN. Then we came back out here together. And she had, after covering the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq for all those years and being on NBA TV and Turner and all that, and she was doing sideline reporting for Turner at the time, she had all the ends with the NBA. So the NBA All-Star Game was out here. And I remember walking up to somebody in February after NFL Network had started in the previous November. It's like February of 2004, somebody comes up to me, I watch you every day. I'm like, really, you have NFL Network? Because I was excited to meet someone who actually had what I was doing. Yeah. And the guy goes, what are you talking about? What's NFL Network? I'm like, so what do you mean what's NFL Network? You say you watch me every day. He goes, you're not on SportsCenter anymore? And I'm like, no, I left last May, paused. And the guy goes, are you all right? And I'm like, well, yeah, like I'm here talking to you,
That's great.
But that's the sense and sensibility that people have, and people still hum the SportsCenter theme at me in airports and whatever, and it's wonderful. I greatly appreciate it. I don't begrudge anybody anything, and I'm very lucky to have had that experience.
Well, I wrote today about Kenny, and I said, there is this thing, it's hard to exactly describe it or figure out exactly how to sort of, sum it up. But there is this thing with the SportsCenter anchors like yourself and Kenny and all of the ones who were there pre-internet and, internet explosion where, I'm doing the whole, I'm an old man, get off my lawn thing. But there was a time where you got all of your sports news from the newspaper in the morning and SportsCenter at night. Yeah. That was how it worked for, a long, long time. So there's this affection for you guys who delivered that news to us on a nightly basis. It's obviously very different now, but do you feel that from fans? Like there's that old school SportsCenter, like before, everything changed in sort of the media landscape of, there's an affection there for you.
Sure. Well, and I greatly appreciate that. And Jimmy, it's funny, like I'm from Staten Island. You're from Queens? Is that where you're
Long
from?
Island.
Long Island. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you and I used to call Sports Phone to find out, the scores. I remember the commercial, get all your sports news instantly, dial 976-1313. I remember the phone number.
I actually worked there and was the voice you heard giving the scores.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah.
Jimmy Traina.
Yeah. One of my first jobs out of college, yeah.
In those old Seinfeld episodes, like, why don't you tell me the name of the movie you want to see? Like, we used to call a phone number to find out what, a movie time was, So, in that same respect, SportsCenter was once upon a time the show of record, and the show of record where you went to it to see what happened because you had no idea what happened, or you did know the final score but didn't see how it all went down. And that is when I was fortunate enough to be there. And because it was that, there was a certain premium on making sure that the show was an entertainment product as opposed to just a mere vessel for getting opinions out of what happened, because that's the way things sort of translated in my tenure there from 96 to 2003, which started out, I was at the end of, I guess, what people would call, in a way, the golden years of SportsCenter in that regard. And it morphed into, we were on the air in 2001, obviously, when 9/11 hit. Stuart and I did the 9/12 overnight SportsCenter, which for us was really off-putting, but it was quite something to be there. But the reason why I bring it up is that's when ESPN began to mimic what CNN did, which was putting the bottom line on the bottom of the screen. And so I was on the air on SportsCenter doing the usual SportsCenter lead-in on camera to set up the background of the sporting event that I was about to do a highlight for. And now here I am doing that entire old school setup, and the final score is being emblazoned across my chest in the bottom line. I actually went to management to say, you guys may be thinking, otherwise about this, because
interesting.
Like, what's up with that? I was the only SportsCenter anchor to actually voice something on that front.
What was the reaction from management?
It was, yeah, of course that's, but this is the way, of course that's a problem. We're going to try and get the algorithm down so the score doesn't cycle through when you're doing your lead-in, but sometimes it's unavoidable, and that's just the way it is now. That's the way we're going to have to do it, especially since, if you remember, they had the ESPN2 logo on those, so they were using it as a possible promotion and advertisement for another product at the time.
Right.
And ESPN News had it as well, and so now we're used to seeing three things on top of each other: a bottom line, a scroll, and then information on top of that, and then a chyron, and then something down the side of the screen. Now we're all used to seeing so much on our screens now. We're attuned to it. But the reason why I just bring this up is that SportsCenter went from that to having two analysts on. It was another, I think it was a Mark Shapiro construct to bring Crossfire from CNN into SportsCenter, to, instead of having the anchor tell you what happened, it was now an anchor in the role of moderator between two analysts coming on to tell you why something happened, sometimes with opposing viewpoints, so they could bash into each other. And then obviously a lot of the split screen talk shows that you see everywhere now was born through that. And that was a type of show that I really wasn't too keen to do as much anymore. And I kind of voiced that towards the end of my tenure there, which may have led to a parting of the ways. But I adore ESPN, and met my wife in the newsroom there. My children are 3 ESPN babies technically, and they're growing up on Pardon the Interruption, and Van Pelt's SportsCenter is a gold standard in our profession. And obviously ESPN's a major partner of the company that employs me. So I'm thrilled at my roots and love every second of it, quite honestly.
I want to ask you about the draft and the schedule release. Last thing, just to put a bow on. Do you have any Kenny Mayne stories? Any Kenny Mayne memory?
Yeah. My favorite Kenny Mayne story that would never happen today is he did a highlight of tennis, Mary Pierce, who, as you remember, wore some low-cut gear on the court. She's leaning over to serve, and he says, "Mary Pierce down a set, although that doesn't appear to be a case right here." And I'm like, turn to him like, wow, did Kenny just really say that on the air? He had a very wry sense of humor that you either got or you did not get. Whereas, the default mechanism for a sports broadcaster is to take you into a moment and make it feel just as special as you watching it at home. Kenny would be basically the opposite of that. He was sort of the inverse of it, to obviously live in the moment. And it was a big moment, but also point out the absurdity. TV games are played not inside of a television set, or the whole concept of, hey, this is a great moment, but hey, we could all be destroyed by an asteroid in 2 seconds anyway. That's the sort of meat and cheeses for everybody. His home run call, just it was always a very oddball sensibility that you either got or didn't get, and thankfully I got it.
100%. Do you know if there was any? Did he get any letters about that Mary Pierce line, or any blowback? I mean,
it was a different time.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, that's like a 1 back then.
I just, is a different time. Obviously, now he would never say anything like that, and maybe he shouldn't have at the time. In the same way that, I got into some little bit of a hot water on a SportsCenter back in the day, watching the Denver Broncos championship parade. So that would make it, I guess, 97 or 98, and there was the owner, Pat Bolin, in the convertible, hoisting the Lombardi Trophy next to his wife, and I said, "There's Pat Bolin with his trophy," which I would never say today, and regret saying it then. But I thought it was a good line, and I went for it. And so that's what I said back in the day, Jimmy.
Would not fly today, of course.
I wouldn't attempt to fly it today. Nor would I want my daughter to see that sort of conversation.
Right.
But
different time.
27-year-old kid back then. So. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure if someone went back through all those SportsCenter tapes, Dan and Keith and yourself, Kilborn, I'm sure there's a heap of lines that.
Yeah, I know. We had a blast, man. Again, it was some of the stuff that I cherish. And when I have somebody call into my show and they're like, "I used to watch you, when you were on with Stewart," and I'm like, "How old are you?" And they say like 37. or like 32, and they used to watch before going to school, like before they got on a friggin' school bus. And I'm like, holy crap. But I'm lucky. Like I said, I'm lucky that I'm doing it. I've been doing it now. This is my, I guess, put it all together since do a 26th year of being on a national broadcast of some sort. So I'm blessed, lucky.
So I'm going to kiss your ass here a little bit.
All right, Jimmy. Thanks for that heads up.
You're welcome. When I watched the NFL draft this year, I was struck by it. It seemed effortless for you because I assume because you've done it for so many years. Now, no matter how many years you do it, that's still got to be a little bit of a nerve-wracking event because it's live and there's a lot of moving parts to it. But do you feel like it's not as difficult for you now as, I mean, you've been doing it for a while, but do you feel like I've got this now, I know what I'm doing? Because it seemed like with you, it was a very it's a relaxed, you got all the moving parts down, you know when to make the joke, you know when to, do the serious stuff. Do you feel that way, or do you still put in the same effort that you put in year one?
Oh gosh, I put in the same effort, but it took me a while to realize what my role is and how to prepare for it. Look, I'm not watching tape. I'm not breaking down the all 22. What I do is every day on my show and on my Twitter feed is I see the narratives. I see what fan bases are hoping for. I see what teams have done. I see what teams are attempting to do. I see what teams need. And I see what teams are on the clock. And I also understand that if a trade happens, that it's something that should have a pin put in it to let folks know, hey, that Stephon Diggs trade that happened last year, here's the pick. It's turned into this. Or when the Jets traded up to 14 from 23rd overall, knowing the fact that they used a 1 from Seattle and a 3 from Seattle and their own 3 to trade up to these spots to get the guard. I'm fully aware of saying, okay, so the Jamal Adams trade now just allowed the new regime to go and take what they didn't like, which is, Jamal Adams asking for all that money. They weren't going to put all that money in his safety, regardless of how unique a safety that he is. They had a problem with that. So what they did is they took the capital from that and put it into a spot where they wanted to actually live and build from, which is the offensive line. And the guy who made this move, his first draft choice was a mountainous guy in Mekhi Becton, and now he's added a card right next to him to protect the guy that they got second overall. Now run left and go. That's what I need to know going into a draft. That's the sort of stuff I need at the top of my head. And thankfully, I do have my own show 3 hours a day to talk about it. So for weeks leading up to it, I had as many, experts or talent evaluators on that would just feed me into my head about the narratives. And so that's what I'm comfortable about. If I went on the air and I needed to know who that third corner off the board was and what his story was, then it would be a more nerve-wracking experience for me because it would require a ton of preparation. But thank goodness the network, NFL Network, puts some lead pipe wielding professionals like Daniel Jeremiah and Charles Davis and David Shaw and Joel Klatt, so on and so forth, and Peter Schrager on our third day. So it's just my job to just be in charge of the nuts and bolts, make sure that I know what the narratives are, make sure when I know the big moments are to push the pedal to the metal, and also make sure, and I'll say this here, is to do a douche-free broadcast. It really is that simple. I know it's very coarse to say it, but my job is to have you watch 4 hours on a Thursday, 5 hours on a Friday, and 7.5 hours on a Saturday. And I don't want you to go, oh, this guy, and click it off. Sometimes, it might come across that I'm trying too hard. I hope not. But that's my philosophy on a draft, Jimmy.
Yeah, I'm very critical. And when humor is used, it's got to be used, sort of the right way. Yeah. So, I thought when I was watching, I was like, this guy's got it, like the perfect balance of, and I'm looking more to, like, you broke down all the safety, that. I'm looking more for like your line when ABBA starts blasting.
Well, I mean, that's also, sometimes you got to talk about what the hell's happening in the room. Right. Certainly if you have to scream over the house band with the guy who's doing the singing looks like PFT commenter, you know what I mean? And so, but I'm just going to say it, and
do you, I don't know if you'll admit this, but like who does anyone say to you, like, Rich, we need you to give a hard sell here on Kings of Leon?
No, but with the stuff that they do say we need to do a hard sell on is like, hey, the draft room is fully vaccinated. And I know I got a lot of people saying, Rich, can you back off on it? But
I wrote that. I wrote the rooms are fully vaccinated, and it's so great to have fans here.
That was the NFL wanted to make sure, and the NFL is proud of the fact that so many people have been vaccinated at stadiums, and they wanted also to make sure that if they are being about making sure that you are aware of COVID, wearing a mask, and what their protocols are, they don't want you tuning in and seeing guys hugging in a war room. Without the words that it's fully vaccinated on the screen. That's why it says fully vaccinated. So when you see the image of like chest bumping and people hugging and they're not wearing masks, but the commissioner's saying you got to wear a mask, this is why they're doing that. So I am the host to basically keep on hammering that point home on behalf of what the league is saying. Yes.
At least they didn't tell you to, say the Goodell chair bit was funny. But you don't answer that. We'll move on. I don't want you to get in trouble.
No, actually, I interviewed him before, and they brought the chair. They brought the chair, and I interviewed him in the chair, and he made me sit in the chair, and I even joked with him like it's like, the biggest chair since Archie Bunker's in the Smithsonian, Right. I mean, but, and I just will say this, and I know you probably don't want to hear this sort of stuff, but that is legitimately who this guy is. I know a lot of people boo him and they see a certain face forward guy. I've gotten to spend time with the guy, and I know people, don't, all right, Rich, you like your boss. I genuinely do. And he did bring the chair there and, a lot of that stuff. And I think fans sitting in the chair, you didn't think that was fun? I mean, you didn't think that was okay?
I wouldn't put that in the fun category.
Well, I mean, what about the Brown fan who looked like
here's what I would
why am I blanking on the wrestler's name from back in the day?
Macho Man.
Randy Savage. And him spinning around and the absurdity of it all is.
This could be just because I'm old and I'd like to see it tightened up a little bit. Like the fact that Jacksonville took 15 minutes to announce Trevor Lawrence.
I'll tell you this too, Jimmy. Since you bring it up, the NFL tells teams to spend at least 5 minutes on the clock. They don't want it. They didn't want him handing it in for Trevor Lawrence. They literally were like this, and when it was 5 minutes, they handed it in. And the reason for that is, and I'll keep pounding this. I will keep saying this. The draft is a TV show, Jimmy.
Right.
It is a television show. So if it's like Trevor Lawrence goes in 1 minute and then we don't show you all 22s and this tape and that tape and here's what he means to Jacksonville and all of that stuff. And then we're already on to the Jets who are a minute in and hand in the card for Zach Wilson. And then the Niners are in and all of a sudden you don't even talk about this stuff. And I will tell you this. The fans that are basically, you didn't even talk 2 minutes about my team. You spent 7 minutes on this guy or whatever.
Right.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is insane. It's insane. So the league tells him, slow it down a little bit. So you'll never get to see what you're saying.
Right. I know. And since you mentioned the draft being entertainment, I don't know what your personal relationship with him is. Any issues at all with what Schefter did that day?
What did he do?
Well, he caused a stir last week by going on Dan Patrick's show and saying he didn't have a new report on Aaron Rodgers. It was the, quote, accumulation of information. And then he decided at 3 o'clock or whatever it was on draft day to say Aaron Rodgers wants out of Green Bay. And some people thought that that was done to sort of add some juice to the draft.
Well, I love Adam Schefter like a brother. So, I never try and out somebody's sources or anything like that. The only reason why it is pertinent is because if Aaron Rodgers did, in fact, send that out there and then show up at the Kentucky Derby and tell Tirico he's disappointed that it gets out there, then obviously that's a story. So, and also how long it was building up and why it showed up on a Thursday, it's of interest to people on that. All I know is that, it changed our pre-draft show, but not the draft itself, unless, I was waiting to hear, to be honest with you, I was waiting to hear that the Broncos had traded for Jordan Love. That's what I was waiting to hear, because but as you could obviously tell, nothing was happening in terms of a trade front of significance where it could get done and the Packers would eat the monster cap hit that they would take by trading him before June 1 just to get the 8th or 9th overall pick in the draft. I mean, that wasn't going to happen. But it just that report only changed the first 3 hours leading up to the draft. But once the draft hit, we were not talking about that until obviously the Packers were on the clock.
And it really didn't become a thing until he went on Dan Patrick's show last, I think it was Friday, and said, he didn't have new information that day. It was an accumulation of information. So that's how it ended up becoming a thing. I had Brian Russillo on the pod last week. I asked him this question, and I'll ask it to you. You're in the league. You have sources. You're in the know. Mm-hmm. Week 1 of the 2021 season, is Aaron Rodgers the quarterback of the Packers? Is Aaron Rodgers on another team? Is Aaron Rodgers retired?
Aaron Rodgers is not retiring. I mean, look, I shouldn't say stuff like that. I have no idea. I mean, I don't talk to Aaron like personally. I mean, I love interviewing him, and the times when I've actually been around him where it's just me, him, and other people, he's been, normal. Like he's like a normal dude, So I just can't believe that he would retire. I mean, stranger things have happened. Jim Brown did it, obviously. Barry Sanders did it. Calvin Johnson did it. Maybe he'll want to do it. I don't know. I know the Jeopardy thing gets mentioned quite a bit. I have my ear to the ground on that front out here as well. There's still many more guest hosts to go.
Right.
And on top of it, though, if it is in any way, shape, or form money related, I can guarantee you Jeopardy does not pay franchise quarterback money to do the
the frustrating thing about the Jeopardy thing for me is he has stated himself in his own words very clearly that he wants to do it and would do it in the offseason. They keep the whole year in like 40-something days. So the Jeopardy thing is not a factor in all of this.
I don't know. Look, but it can be in terms of whatever leverage he wants to play. But
like you said, what leverage is Jeopardy versus starting quarterback?
No, but I mean, he could say it like, and what does Brian Gutekunst know about Sony Pictures Television? Like, I don't know if he knows. I have no idea if he's really attuned to whether that's a real thing or not. So I mean, everything's a leverage play. I can't sit here and say one thing or not. If I had to guess, I think he will be the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers week 1. I really believe that.
I think became a hero in Green Bay.
I just know. But I don't know. Nobody knows. I don't even know if Aaron Rodgers knows. And people, I guess one person told, what was it? Yahoo is 5% chance, and then somebody told Bob McGinney of The Athletic it's a 2% chance. Got it down to milk percentage. Who the hell knows? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Like something could happen over the summer months. Nobody knows.
Well, whether it's possible. So much time.
So much time. Yeah. And then,
if this was July, it'd be a lot more interesting.
Well, I think it's going to go to July. I think so. Look, the Packers have to realize that they have a situation in hand where they have an MVP quarterback who, in this day and age, it's proven that if you eat right and you play and live well, that, and I think Aaron Rodgers can do all that, you can be a viable quarterback into your mid-40s. Now, even Tom Brady, it required him to go to another spot that was willing to take him on, that his home team was there was only a certain amount that they were really willing to go to accommodate him into his 21st and 22nd seasons into the NFL. So, but even that team and owner decided, okay, we're going to pitch the idea of replacing our guy with a drafted quarterback into the trash can, and stick with the GOAT that we have for as long as possible. And, the Patriot way was the way that they surrounded Brady. The Green Bay way is apparently what Albert Breer told me on my show today is the problem is what rankles Aaron Rodgers, which is they won't take on a cap problem in the future to fill the roster with people that he feels can make him win right now. In the same way that the leveraging of the future for Tampa has been done, multiple times over now that they've re-signed people like Levante David and Ndamukong Suh, even Brady himself, Gronk, Fournette, to contracts that they are going to pay the salary cap whirlwind reaper down the road. They don't care. And I think Aaron Rodgers sees that and saying, well, why don't you care? And Green Bay's response of, well, this is the way we've done it for 40 years. And as I said on the show today, Rodgers' response to that could be, well, you did it for so long. You got 2 Super Bowls and only 1 win out of Favre, and you got 1 Super Bowl and only 1 win out of me. How great really is it? you know? So why don't you see what the Bucs are doing for Tom, do it for me, and let's go win and knock Tom out of the playoffs as opposed to the other way around. Like, let's go. Right. So that's apparently the case. I don't know how that gets rectified in the next few weeks.
I was going to say, isn't it too late, though, for the Packers?
It sure sounds like it. So I don't know what the answer is on that. But to me, you know, if you look around, would you rather, if you're Aaron Rodgers, all things being equal, remove the personal, remove the I'd love to stick it to my employer out of it. Denver a better spot to win, or is it Green Bay? I mean, it's just not even close. It's not even in the same realm of possibility. Like you go to Denver right now, you got to start from scratch. You got Vic Fangio there. You got whatever offense that you'll be able to install. Great. You got a bunch of young receivers that you're going to have to coach up on how to be Aaron Rodgers friendly. You got a running game that's of interest, sure. An offensive line that's constantly holding, you know, and you live in Patrick Mahomes' division. Or you can just absolutely continue to be the king of your NFC North roost, where there's Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, and maybe Justin Fields as a rookie, or Andy Dalton. And you already know your team, you know your facility, you know your coach, you know everything. I mean, it's just not even worthy of a conversation. But when you put all the other stuff into it, and if he feels that's untenable to stay there, then you got to look around for a spot that you can win right now in your closing window of an opportunity with a team that's willing to dress that window to your liking and already has the window dressing in place. I don't know of too many that are willing to do that.
Everything you just said, which is why the only thing out of everything you've said about this entire thing, the only thing I've disagreed with you on is I would not be shocked if he retired. Because I think he beats to his own drum.
Maybe.
I think he's a little different than the typical NFL quarterback. You know, like you've seen him on McAfee, very thoughtful, esoteric kind of thoughts. He's got the Jeopardy thing. He's, you know, engaged to someone who's in Hollywood. It would not shock me because, like you said, where are you going where you're going to go win a Super Bowl? There's not that opportunity unless, you know,
maybe
there's some.
But he still loves football and he still loves his teammates. And I think walking away like that would be difficult for him to do. But then again, look, I don't profess to speak for him on his behalf or profess to know him. You know what I mean? Right. I just know of him and I hear what I hear around the league. That would surprise me to retire.
Okay. We talked about the draft. Before I let you go, just to break the fourth wall here, Rich and I are speaking late Tuesday afternoon. The schedule releases Wednesday night. The podcast will come out Thursday morning, but the schedule gets released all day anyway on Wednesday anyway. But what about that show? What's that show like to do? Difficult? Not that difficult?
Oh, it's fun. It's great, man. I mean, and it's just another aspect of, you know, now that we do it on NFL Network. When we first started doing that, the amount of crap that we got from people saying, you're just making shit up now, you know, and we're like, yeah, what we're doing is we're trying to create content. We're trying to make everything that the NFL has content. People love it. People can't get enough of it. So let's have content. Let's have a show out of information. It's basically the celebration of paperwork is all it is.
A 3-hour celebration.
A 3-hour celebration of paperwork that we know, though, when it happens, when it comes to actually going through it, when you're actually living in the paperwork at the time of the paperwork's schedule, it will be of crucial importance. And to basically predict when these week 12 through week 15 stretches, which one will actually be as relevant as we assume it to be based on previous season's results. That is sort of the Kaiser Soze type trick that we're pulling off. But we also know that taking information that you already know, which is who plays who and who plays who where, and then placing it in the construct of the when and then on what channel, and then to basically say that your team gets all of these nationally televised games and your team does not, starts a nice little argument and conversation. And then it is a way to turn the TV show into like sports talk radio, that once you get through, when I interview a coach, I think Matt Nagy's on, I believe Brandon Staley's going to be on. We're going to be in
Al and Joe Buck.
Right. And that's always fun when I interview the three of them and we go back and forth on it. But when you're talking to a coach or a general manager about it, you get through the general sense of when the bye is and what your first game is. And then you can't even ask the coach, well, you got 3 out of your last 4 on the road, and you'll get the answer of, we'll play them when we play them. You know, when you're through all of that, then you actually start talking about your team's, the person that you're interviewing, all of their storylines. So Matt Nagy will obviously be what I asked him on my show last week about his plan for Justin Fields. You could figure that out. So so it's just another way to talk football through the construct of something. And now ESPN's 2 is doing it. I mean, again, we got so much crap, Jimmy. It's crazy how much crap we got.
Well, now they're doing, from what I saw on Twitter a little earlier, they're going to announce week 1. Fox is announcing week 1 on whatever
FS1.
Morning show. CBS is announcing.
I guess
whatever.
Skip Bayless is going to do my job for me on the week 1 Fox schedule, is what it looks like. And then Good Morning America is doing the first Monday night doubleheader for ESPN. I guess when you pay more of a premium for these rights this time around for the next 10 years, there are more liberties that you're given. And
you want to double the rights fees, and this is what happens. When do you find out the schedule? The show starts at 8 p.m. Eastern.
I'll
when does
probably
Rich Eisen
get it when I get it off the air on my show tomorrow around 3 Eastern time. It'll probably
Is it
be
hard for you to keep that a secret?
No, because I mean,
can you at 3 o'clock tomorrow? Can you text me what the 3 Thanksgiving games are?
Sure,
that's really what I care about.
No problem, Jimmy. That's exactly what I want to do with my standing with the NFL. I'll be honest with you. I will shoot you straight. I'm sorry if I've cursed a couple times here on your.
No, you're allowed to curse. It's fine.
I have so far passed the part of my life and career where I give a shit to come across as knowing something you don't. It's just there's just life is too damn short. So like, am I going to go on my show tomorrow if I do get the schedules beforehand? I will say that I have them, because that is a benefit to let everyone know that this is the show that I'm doing later on. It's my way of saying I'm doing that, and also a little wink and a nod that I do know, but I don't need to come across as that's what drives me crazy about people accusing me of tipping picks in the NFL draft, just because I want to come across as knowing more. Like I want to make it seem like I can guess what the pick is. I could care less.
Listen, I respect that and I understand that. But listen, I would also find it hilarious if you went on your show tomorrow and been like, here I go. Look what I got here. Yeah. I've got the schedule. I've got the schedule.
I have done that before because, I don't mind taunting or anything like that. Just, but I'm not going to, drop hints or anything like that. My guess is it's Cowboys at Bucks to start the season. That would be an upset.
The Thanksgiving is, I like to know Thanksgiving and the late Saturday game. I know everything's going to be, well, I guess the new TV stuff starts not this year, but the year after. But
I got 17
and now you have Thursday night with Prime. Right. So I hope they get a horrific game, so I don't have to sit there and stream a game. But again,
Jimmy, what's the matter with streaming? What are you talking about?
Because I like to flip around. I don't want to stream on Amazon. I like to flip around during the incessant commercials.
Hold on a second, Jimmy.
Not get locked into one.
Jimmy, I know you're rushing me off because you might have something other going on with
you. No. I thought you had a go.
Don't worry about it. So, no, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Speaking on, hold on a second.
I don't want to stream the game. I want to watch it on cable.
Can I do something that is very, I guess, self-serving? Hold on.
Yes, please.
I'm going to remove my paddle that is just getting started on it.
Okay. Put Peacock. Oh my God! Yeah, I made the comment to the wrong person.
Okay, so man, a streamer. It's simple. You don't have a function on your remote where you can toggle between your cable and your Apple TV or your Roku, whatever.
Of course I do.
So what's your problem?
There's a big difference between streaming a talk show like yours than streaming a game. Because my thing with the game is there's so much downtime.
Okay.
That I don't want to watch one commercial. I want to go flip to see, a scene from The Office on Comedy Central. I want to go flip to see if something's on the Food Network. That's what I don't want to sit there and watch one commercial or one talking head. No
from
offense.
Your streamer to your other.
It's a pain in the. It's not. Everything's on delay.
What does it take? Honestly, I've got a function where you hit one button and it goes from one thing to the other.
No, you have to change your input. Right. Oh yeah. I guess you can.
Oh my God, Jimmy. You can't trade. You can't. I do feel for you. You can't change your input. God, because if I was in person and it was okay, I would hug you right now that you can't change your input from your HDMI 1.
It's not just that. You got
God bless you, Jimmy.
You got to change the input and then you got to start flipping around. It's a pain in the ass.
Oh my God.
Especially like, if it's a bad Thursday night game and you really are not in on every play, one of those Jaguars Titans specials.
Dude, you got to get out of this. My kids, I got 12, 10,
Oh,
and
forget
7.
that. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Jimmy, I got a 12, 10, and a 7. They don't turn on DirecTV
Oh, I know.
anymore. They don't. They turn on DirecTV for sports. They turn on DirecTV for sports, but otherwise they go straight to the Apple TV, and they're choosing from Peacock, Paramount, Hulu, Netflix, and
YouTube.
Well, we're trying to keep them off that because that is.
Well, no, my nieces.
At least the other ones I can put on HBO Max. You can put on some sort of
my nieces are 15 and 11, and if there is something on television, they won't watch it live on TV. They'll stream it off their iPad. Like,
So come on, Jimmy, get with the program.
Well, I'm not 11.
But you got to get with the program. Streaming is the way to go. Yeah. I love being on one. I know it's the way of the future. And
I'm fine with it for that stuff. It's the games. The games is what I don't want. What I don't want to stream. That's my issue. It's the games. It's just the games.
Thursday night's coming on, man.
I have no choice. Right, you have no choice. It's coming. You have no choice at all. And the NFL is not bad. If you're the fan of the other sports, you better have every streaming service there is because it's coming.
I agree.
It's coming.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, like you mentioned, since I insulted streaming, let me say the Rich Eisen Show every day from 12 to 3 Eastern on Peacock. I have Peacock. Peacock. I'm a subscriber.
Well, it's outstanding, and it's the only streaming service with a live channel function, Jimmy. It's it.
Right.
It's the real deal.
And you got The Office and WWE and Rich Eisen.
That's right.
What more do you need from a streaming service?
Dan Patrick.
And Dan Patrick as well. And Just Getting Started podcast.
That's right.
And NFL Network, of course.
Thank you, brother.
Now, what do you have a little break here after the schedule release?
Not really. I'm doing my show every day, which is a bear.
No, I mean, no vacation coming up. I mean, in this COVID era, who wants a vacation, I guess. But, this would be, I think, the time.
No, I'll take a week in July or something. There's more stuff that's going to be announced soon of what I'm doing. It's being cooked up with Peacock and then with other things that I'm up to. And, I own my show now, Jimmy. So that's, it was. I'll tell you this: don't ever have somebody call you up saying we're moving on in a different direction 2 days before Christmas, before a pandemic. I don't recommend that, but that's what happened to me and my show, and Dan and his as well. My radio world got blown up as well. So I started from scratch, and the benefit is I own the show, and so it's a bear, but it's my own. So I'll do that every day. But my wife fills in for me when I'm not in the chair, so she'll get some time. It'll be fun.
Listen, when it happens to you, it's a scary prospect, but I would have had no doubt you would have bounced back.
I appreciate you saying that, but I'll tell you what: 2 days before Christmas, when you get that phone call, it's just like, oh no, and then I've got. I mean, the crew that I have, the people that are on the air with me and behind the scenes, like they are true blue, and
you need that.
It's for real. So I'm a lucky guy, like I said.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks,
enjoy
Jimmy.
the schedule release. People listen to this after the schedule release, but hopefully I get those Thanksgiving games. I want to know how much time I can avoid my family.
Look for my text.
The game.
Look for my text, Jimmy. Look for my text.
I will. The better the games on Thanksgiving, the better excuse I have to avoid the family.
Well, I mean, so hold on a minute. You could kind of figure it out. Last year it was So the Lions will have the division game, and the Cowboys will have the intra conference game. So I don't know. Right. You could pretty much figure out who are the AFC teams on the Cowboys schedule, and then I have no idea what the last game is going to be, but it's usually a big, fat, nice division game for you. So
I wrote a column in 2020 in November. It's time to do away with the Lions on Thanksgiving. Am I crazy, or do you agree?
Well, I will leave you with this nugget. My old boss, Steve Bornstein, who is smart enough to have hired me twice, as I like to say, and who also was kind enough to tell me a long time ago, when I didn't believe it, that I was born to do the NFL draft. When he got the NFL draft and he put NFL draft on NFL Network to go against the ESPN version of it, which he helped birth with Berman and Bob Lee and what have you back in the day. He once told me that he kind of ran it up the flagpole that Thanksgiving games are beachfront property, and if you do not finish in the top half of your division a few years in a row, you should be relegated out of it. And
the thing I always get is people are going to watch that game no matter what. So put the shitty Lions there, and you'll get your rating.
But it's a tradition, and it's the Midwest, and I don't think the NFL will ever mess with that. But certainly, since one of the top television executives of all time, I think, was running that up the flagpole, and it did not fly. So
interesting.
I don't think you're ever. But Steve also did say that he thought that they should put the Super Bowl on President's Day weekend, so you could actually have a national holiday. What's actually happening?
Yeah,
that's what this 17th. You do realize that the 17th.
Yeah, but there's still a week. But they have to start the week. They have to start the season a week later to get to President's Week. I think we're still a week shy.
It's gonna. They're gonna get there.
Yeah,
Jimmy, it's gonna get there.
That will make a lot of people happy. That's for sure.
Well, it's gonna come. It's going to come. Trust me on that.
I'll forgive all the streaming if they get.
Well, everybody says that the day after the Super Bowl should be a national holiday, so that's coming. So,
well, it's good that they're getting there because I know that's a lot of fans want that.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Appreciate it.
Take care,
all right,
brother.
be well. Stay safe. Take care. All right, joining me now, he appears periodically here on the SI Media Podcast, chief media critic for Rolling Stone, Alan Sepinwall, and of course the all-knowing man of The Sopranos. So that's almost more important than anything. How are you?
I'm good, Jimmy. How you doing?
I'm good. Before we get into the list you did with some colleagues on the 100 Greatest Sitcoms, was it just the anniversary of Pine Barrens or something like that?
Yes, it was. It was, God, I'm trying to remember the date, but I think it might have been the 20th anniversary because I think season 3 was in 2001. So we are all getting old, but that's a hell of an hour of TV.
The amount of content that has been derived from Pine Barrens, oral histories, interviews, podcasts. I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
It's amazing. And David Chase kind of hates talking about that episode because, well, on the one hand, he thinks it's great and he understands why it's beloved. And on the other hand, he's so sick of talking about the Russian. So, I'm impressed that he did a new round of a couple of interviews, this time around because it's one of his least favorite topics.
It's weird for me, though. Like, obviously, the thing with the Russian is huge. I'm not trying to downplay it, but there are so many other things in that episode. I mean, to me, it's the Paulie Christopher banter more than the Russian that stands out.
Yes. No, they definitely, if you go back in and you watch it again, like I did when I wrote the Soprano sessions, it's like, that the Russian's not coming back. He's not what stands out in the episode. It's the two of them getting on each other's nerves. It's Tony fighting with Gloria. It's Tony laughing at poor Bacala, who has shown up in the middle of the night to help him. And Tony's there's so many other great things in that episode.
There's two great things too, because you mentioned, Tony's frustration with them. And then there's also Tony is constantly having cell phone problems while they're trying to call him from the woods. I mean, he's, he throws the phone at one point, the static, and then I had forgotten this till I did a rewatch last year when quarantine first started. And I remember tweeting about it. That episode starts, when Tony calls Paulie to go get the money, Paulie's in the nail salon getting a manicure. It's just so, fitting of the Paulie Walnuts aura.
And then he winds up as far from that sort of beautifully maintained image as you can by the time he gets rescued from the woods.
And one of my all-time favorite lines in the history of the show is when, they think the Russian is dead in the trunk.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out what to do and then, where to bury him. And then Paulie's like, and then after that, we'll go up to, we'll go to Atlantic City, we'll go to Morton's, we'll have a steak. He goes, so the day's not a total waste. We got a dead guy in the truck, and he's like, so the day's not a total waste.
That's great. My favorite bit is earlier with the cell phone trouble, Tony's trying to tell him that he was in the interior defense ministry or something, and they mishear and he was an interior decorator? His place looked like shit.
Right. Phenomenal. Just phenomenal. So I have Alan on because, like I said, for Rolling Stone last week, they dropped the 100 greatest sitcoms of all time. And normally I detest lists, but I think good TV sitcom lists are good to argue about and banter about. So I will say, so there's two reactions I had. When I first opened the list, it did kind of smack me in the face because the first thing you see is number 100 is Schitt's Creek. And I thought the show deserved a little more respect than 100.
Okay, so that Schitt's Creek was a big point of contention on this list. Because while I, obviously, as the main TV critic at Rolling Stone, had a lot of input and often sort of was able to cast the tie-breaking vote in things, I was not the only one putting together this list. And so you had people with very different opinions on a lot of these shows. And this was one where there were some people who adore it and love it and wanted it much, much higher. And then there were some other people who didn't think it belonged on the list at all. And I'm not going to name names about who lay on what side.
Right.
I will say that I was never the hugest Schitt's Creek fan, although I did like the show. And so eventually, after a lot of these arguments, we decided, all right, the best way to compromise is we're going to put it as 100. It'll be the first show people see. We were acknowledging that it belongs in a discussion on the continuum of great sitcoms, but we're not going to put it any higher than that.
It was a smart play because I got pissed off right off the bat. So it was a smart play. I should just for back. I should have gotten into this first. So it was you and 3 other colleagues, so 4 people total, and sort of like give me, if you can, just in a quick way, the process of how, like you just said, if some people want to show, some people don't want to show. How'd you end up putting the list together?
There were the 4 of us who wrote it and several other editors who didn't write but were involved in the selection process and coming up with the rules. So originally it started out, we were going to do, I think, a top 50 sitcoms list. And that's what ultimately is in the May issue of Rolling Stone, the magazine. And then we came up with it and we were really happy with it in the order. But then we felt like we'd left off so many shows and it was really killing us. So we said, maybe we'll do 75. And we got up to 75. And again, it was not enough. So finally we landed at 100. At a certain point, it went from American shows only to allowing international shows, which then includes something like Schitt's Creek, which is Canadian, and a lot of the British shows like Fawlty Towers or Fleabag and a couple of Australian things. And so then it just became like, well, what order do we put things in? Some things were self-evident. I knew from the minute one that The Simpsons and Cheers and Seinfeld were going to be the top 3 shows. There was no doubt in my mind. I felt pretty sure that was going to be the order, although we had some discussions about it. And it wasn't until we got out of like the top 10, maybe even the top 15, that it really started becoming an issue of, well, is this show really better than this? And how much are we valuing like laughter versus performance versus just sort of like creativity or inspiration? There's a lot of different factors that went in there. So sometimes a show is very high up, both because it was good, but also because it was influential, like I Love Lucy. It's the most copied show in the history of television. Right. And then other shows were just really high, like a Parks and Rec, because it's just really, really great. And I love it a lot. And so, that I believe is the newest show in the top 10.
So with any list, if you're going to complain about something should be higher or something should be on the list, you've got to also counter it with like what shouldn't be on the list or what should be lower.
Sure.
And I thought you guys, for an overall sitcom list, I thought you guys did a tremendous job at the top 20. Like the 20 you'd expect to be there was sort of there, I think. My issue, I had one main issue with a top 10 show.
Okay.
Now, Curb came in at number 12.
Yes.
And Curb is probably my all-time favorite sitcom.
I love Curb.
You can't tell me that if you were going to sit down and watch a television show for a half an hour, that you'd rather watch the Andy Griffith Show than Curb Your Enthusiasm.
A couple things. It depends on what mood I'm in, because those are two.
There's no mood where you would choose Andy Griffith over Curb Your Enthusiasm.
See, no. They're very different. They're very different vibes, for one thing. And for the other, like, I love Curb. And there's 2 reasons it is where it is. One is it came after Seinfeld. So Seinfeld did, with Larry David, did most of what Curb has done first. And the other is that it's just not a very consistent show. There's episodes that are among the funniest things that have ever been made, seasons that are among the great sitcom seasons ever made. And then there's long stretches where it's really not good at all. At least I have felt. And so like ultimately, if you're factoring the consistency at all, that seemed like a good spot to put it in.
I sort of screwed up a little bit here because Andy Griffith, I think, was 14th. So you didn't have that ahead of Curb. But my beef was that Andy Griffith would be in the top 20, I guess.
Andy Griffith is wonderful. I watched that with my kids like a year or two ago, right before the pandemic, I think. It holds up very well. It's just like I felt so happy watching that show again and going back in time and seeing like Don Knotts and Andy Griffith bounce off each other. Like some of the older shows have not aged as well as that. I think that one like plays really, really well even now, 50 years later. 60 years
I was
later,
never able to get into that show.
That's okay.
That was the other thing. It was interesting to me as someone who grew up in the 80s, total 80s sitcoms person. None of the shows I watched as a kid, Family Ties, Growing Pains, Who's the Boss, Different Strokes, Facts of Life, none of those entered the top 100. It was kind of a little bit of a sad thing to see, I have to admit.
Well, I mean, we're around the same age. I'm an 80s kid as well, and there's a lot of 80s sitcoms on there. Cheers is the number 2 show overall. We've got a bunch. Family Ties is definitely, there's like a couple of dozen shows that it really hurts me to not have in this top 100 list. Family Ties is probably among that group. The others, maybe not so much. That was a very good show, but as it is, like, we had 3 of the 4 sitcoms from that classic mid-80s NBC lineup. So we had Cheers, we had The Cosby Show, and we had Night Court. And at a certain point, it's like you're also trying to represent lots of different eras here,
right,
on top of doing the best shows. And, there's a lot of relatively recent shows on there, maybe too many. I don't know. It's sort of hard to figure things out in terms of recency bias. But I don't think that the 80s is an underrepresented decade within that top 100.
You mentioned Family Ties. It hurt you not to put on the list. I was going to ask you, might as well, since you did it, let's go there. Was there a show you fought for that didn't make the list, or was there a show you fought for to be much higher on the list?
I ultimately, like, any complaints about the order can fall on me. There's a few things like the Schitt's Creek thing where it was more of a group decision, but a lot of it was we were picking shows together, and then at a certain point, I went off on my own and figured, all right, this should be higher than this, and that should be lower than that. So I feel pretty good about the order overall. There's definitely shows that I wish were on there. There's also shows that, like, we were debating until the last minute. Since we knew that Schitt's Creek was going to be 100, for instance, it was really like that 99th spot that was the last decision that we made. And that came down to like a bunch of very different kinds of shows. So I ultimately went with Frank's Place, which is this little scene but really terrific Tim Reed show that lasted only a season on CBS in the late 80s. But we were also looking at Happy Endings, which was a relatively recent show. One of my editors was pushing hard for Gilligan's Island as both a show of their childhood, but also a representative of sort of these broader high concept 60s sitcoms like The Munsters and The Addams Family, which are not really... none of those are on there, and it would have been nice to get one of them in. It was just sort of like figuring out one versus the other, and on the day I had to make the decision, I went with Frank's Place.
The other show sort of in that group that wasn't in there that I think absolutely 100% should be in there just from a nostalgia situation and just, I know every single person my age watched this show as a kid, was the Brady Bunch.
I think Gilligan's Island is the better of the two Sherwood Schwartz shows. I mean, I've seen every Brady Bunch episode multiple times. I could probably like recite the dialogue along with the Bradys as we watch them because, but I think that there's a degree to which the stuff you grow up watching when you're very young and impressionable is not always necessarily the best stuff. It just matters to you because of when you saw it.
Right.
And I don't think like the Brady Bunch is, one of the 100, 150th, 200 best comedies ever made.
That hurts.
It's just one that's really ubiquitous among Generation X. And I understand why, but I'm not losing sleep over the Brady Bunch not being on the list. I'll say that.
I did. That hurt. The show that you had in the top 20, which I was really glad to see in the top 20, which I don't know why, but I feel like it never gets enough love and attention when people talk about the best sitcoms, is Taxi.
Oh, love Taxi. When I wrote, when Matt Zoller-Seitz and I wrote TV the Book, which also has a top 100 ranking, but it's for every show, we had to like do sample entries as part of the submission to different publishers. And I think Matt wrote about Deadwood because that's one of his favorite shows ever. And I wrote about Taxi because I've always loved that. And I've always felt it's sort of, like you say, it doesn't get the love it quite deserves. It kind of falls in this nether region in between the All in the Family, Mary Tyler Moore period, and that 80s heyday of like Cheers and those shows. But it's incredible. And so I wanted to write a little thing to write about Taxi, but also to be able to illustrate, hey, we can say great things about shows that are obviously immortal, and we can say great things about shows that you maybe haven't thought of in a long time. So I'm always happy to find an excuse to remind people that Taxi was so good.
Yeah, I did a rewatch of that. It was disappointing, though, because a lot of the episodes, for some reason, weren't on Hulu at the time.
All of the best episodes are not on any of the streaming platforms. I think it has at least partially to do with music rights. Like there's a famous episode where they play Stevie Wonder's "You Are the Sunshine of My Life" when Reverend Jim's dad dies.
Right.
So I have to think that's part of it. But
I was
really
amazed
annoying.
at how much I enjoyed the rewatch of that. Really a good show. There are a couple of other ones here that I wanted to mention specifically.
Come at me, Jimmy. I'm ready.
Cosby Show at 16. I thought that would be higher on the list. I mean, that was a groundbreaking show, and the ratings for it obviously were legendary. 16 is not a bad ranking, but Cosby not one of the 10 best. Cosby Show not one of the 10 best sitcoms.
I mean, that's a hard one. We debated whether it should be on the list at all. Same with
because
Louis.
Of Bill Cosby's.
Yeah, Bill Cosby is a monster. Bill Cosby is
a
a monster, and here is this show that like is inspired by his own family, and he put so much of himself into it. It's not something that anyone can even watch now, really. If you
I totally disagree with that. I think you got to separate it's a TV show. It's a TV show. I'd have a hard time maybe watching him do stand up.
Okay.
But, for the time too, when that came out, the whole country Thursdays at 8 watched the Cosby Show. And you did put it on the list at 16. So
yeah. And and if you're taking the Bill Cosby as a sexual predator out of it and just looking at it as a show, that felt about right to me. Maybe we could move it up a couple of notches. I don't know. It was huge. It was influential. I think of those 80s NBC shows, it was great for maybe only a couple of years. Like I did a rewatch like shortly before all of the Cosby stuff came back into the news again. My kids and I were watching it and we stopped. But like after you get past like season 2 or 3, it's already starting to run into some creative trouble. And so, for that reason, as much as anything else, I just think the other shows ahead of it are better, even though it's hugely important. And then it's just a mess to think about it because of him.
Now, another show that I have never watched one episode of, but I know its popularity. I know the money it makes for CBS. I know how long it's been on, is Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
And you have it at 90.
Yes.
Again, I've never watched it. I can't speak to the quality, but just knowing what I know about the business side of television.
Yeah.
Do people have legitimate beef if they want that higher on the list?
I mean, I've seen the opposite. I've definitely seen some like sitcom snobs be like, I can't believe Big Bang Theory is on the list at all. And then you run into like, how much should popularity itself matter? Like some people are upset that I think Friends is 38th. Like that's a huge show, and it's a huge show across multiple generations. Like teenagers are watching this now,
right.
Like that in The Office. And so like, how highly should these things go? And while we try to consider popularity in terms of like its impact on the culture, ultimately the primary thing was like, how good is this show? And Big Bang Theory, when it was good, was really, really good. And that's why I put it on the list. But it took basically 3 years to get good in the first place. And even after that, it would be kind of uneven. It's one of my wife's favorite shows ever. She's watched every episode many, many times, which means I've been in the room for episodes many, many times. So I know it well. And, I had no problem ultimately putting it on the list. But like the popularity shouldn't be that much of a factor for where
it's funny you mentioned Friends, because I want to get into that, but then we'll do one other thing and then wrap. When I saw 38, it didn't offend me, but I said I could see that one generating a lot of heat for the writers of this. I have a really weird relationship with Friends that I can't understand or describe. When it was on Thursday nights on NBC, I watched every episode, would make sure I was home to watch it, or I would, tape it. I did not miss an episode. I love the show. I cannot watch the repeats under any circumstances. I don't know what it is. I don't know if the humor now, I don't know. I don't want to get into it about me, but I cannot, to me, that's a show that does not hold up at all. And it's bizarre because I know it's enormous with younger people and on Netflix.
Yeah, now it's not even on Netflix anymore. Now it's on HBO Max.
Peacock.
It's been like that in The Office just recently like made these big streaming moves. Again, that comes down to, I thought it was a very good show. At its best, it was wonderful those first couple of years. It ran 10 years. A lot of those, especially towards the end, were not very good. And even at its best, I didn't like, it was never my favorite of those must-see TV shows. Seinfeld was better. I mostly like News Radio better. Like, I guess that maybe that's an example of me letting the popularity sway things a little bit, because I put Friends at 38 and News Radio at 50, and they were roughly contemporaries of each other. And I would much rather go back and do a News Radio rewatch than a Friends rewatch. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not entirely consistent with my rationale for where things went. But when we laid the list out and I've looked at the order after moving it around a lot, I said, all right, this makes sense to me. This looks good.
And why The Simpsons at number one?
This is the best show. It's the best show ever. It's the best comedy ever. It's the complaint I hear anytime I put The Simpsons at the top of a list, whether it's here in the TV book or anything else, is, yeah, but it's been bad for 20 or 30 years now. And first of all, I disagree with that. I think that the later seasons are still good a lot of the time, just not as good as the show was in that first decade. But when you're like the best comedy ever for 10 years and you do so many things so well and you're hugely influential to multiple generations of comedy viewers and writers, like, to me, there's not any question. It did more. It did it better. It did it better for longer. It's The Simpsons. It's always going to be The Simpsons. I have a hard time imagining another show coming along in the time that I'm doing this and unseating it.
And what were give me like the one or two biggest complaints, the most complaints you got about the list?
Definitely Friends being low was one. Office being relatively low. I think it's in the 20s. 23, yeah. Happy Endings has come up a lot. What was really fun is two things. One, most of the complaints have been really polite. You know, usually when you do these lists, you get people who are really outraged and angry and are just the biggest jerks about it. And we've gotten a little of that, but mostly like people have been sort of measured in their comments. Like, okay, I understand that like your list is not going to be my list, but I wish this was on here. I wish that was on here. So it's like a rare moment of seeing Twitter be polite about something that could be controversial.
Well, like I said, I thought you guys did a really good job with the top 20. You know, you could quibble with the order. You know, I just realized one show not on the list, since we're here on the Sports Illustrated Media Podcast, they had a very, very, very short run, was Sports Night.
That's another one of those like 24 or so shows I wish could have been on there. We thought about it. I think ultimately the ruling on that was there's a lot of shows that could be considered a drama or could be considered a comedy. Like that's why The Wonder Years is not on there, because ultimately we felt it trended a little bit more towards drama. And I think that's what the decision we made about Sports Night.
That's fair. That's fair. If you, Alan Sepinwall, had to watch one series and could not watch the other series ever again, Honeymooners or I Love Lucy? You, not what the list reflects, you personally.
I mean, I would say Lucy just because there's more episodes of it. So like those 39 episodes of The Honeymooners are amazing. But if like I have to spend the rest of my life only watching The Honeymooners, I'm going to sort of lose my mind after a while. Whereas Lucy, you've got, I think, 7 or 8 seasons of it. So there's just a lot more to get through, even if it's maybe not as overall consistent as that one season of The Honeymooners is.
All right. Well, we made it through, even though you had Curb at 12, and it should have been 1, 2,
I can't believe I survived this appearance. I'm amazed you even had me on, Jimmy. If you never have me on again, I will understand.
At least get it in the top 10. I mean, come on. There has never been anything like that show on television.
There was Seinfeld. There was something exactly like that show.
This took Seinfeld to another level, don't you think?
No, I mean, like I said in the blurb, I think that Curb at its best is a funnier show than Seinfeld. That's
right.
But Seinfeld, like most of what it is doing are things that Seinfeld did. It's just sort of expanding on it because they can use profanity, because they're doing shorter seasons. It can be a little more serialized. They have certain tools available to them that Larry and Jerry did not when they were making the earlier show, but they're just building on that. And Seinfeld, I think, is just a much more consistent show than Curb is.
That's fair. That's fair. Although I hated the last 2 seasons of Seinfeld, but you know, that's a whole other issue. I thought I got, you know, like people love the episodes with Frogger and Kenny Rodgers. Yeah. I thought all that got so. It's the same thing with Curb. I mean, listen, I can't knock you down because everything you're saying is true. Seinfeld and Curb at its essence, the best episodes are about the day-to-day daily life minutia.
Yes,
that's what it's about. The stop and chat, and you know, not that there's anything wrong with it. That's what those shows.
Like yesterday, I went grocery shopping and I had to deal with a pig parker, and I was like, "Thanks, Curb, for giving me the word for that."
Absolutely. All right, appreciate you coming on as always. Always fun, and I'm sure we'll get you back soon. Here, give it one show everyone should be watching right now. Give me one sitcom, one drama right now if people are looking for something to binge.
All right, there's a show on Apple TV Plus called For All Mankind. It's sort of set in an alternate reality where the Russians beat us to the moon, and so the space race never ended. There's 2 seasons of it available now. It's really fantastic. It's the finale of season 2 is one of the best episodes of TV I've seen in a long time. And in terms of comedy, God, this has not been a really great stretch for comedy on television. My wife and I have been watching Be Positive lately on CBS. But there's a new show on HBO Max called Hacks that's premiering this week that I like a lot, with Gene Smart basically as like a waspy Joan Rivers whose career is coming towards an end.
That sounds interesting.
And she's trying to revive it, and she's really terrific in it.
She's a great actress. Yeah,
yes, exactly.
I just realized not on the list. It's only been one season, but people looking for something to binge. I know season 2 coming out. Ted Lasso. Too early for that.
Too early for that.
People love that, and it's a sports show, so I figured.
Yes, no, and that's that. I'm looking forward to that coming back in July.
Too early. All right. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Be well. Stay safe. All right, that wraps it up for this week's episode of the SI Media Podcast. My thanks to Rich Eisen and Alan Sepinwall. As always, had fun talking to both of them. If you missed last week's show, it was a good one. Ryan Russillo from The Ringer, Brian Baumgartner from The Office with a guest. So check that out in the archives. And if you can subscribe to the SI Media Podcast and maybe rate and review, that helps tremendously, and it would be greatly appreciated. If you're a new listener, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter. I always want to hear from new listeners and guest suggestions. So if you're still at this point in the pod, send me a guest suggestion on Twitter, and it'll mean a lot that you lasted this long. All right, we'll see you next week right here on the SI Media Podcast. Stay safe. Take care.